Pricing in Microsoft Fabric can be overwhelming, but a tool exists to estimate your monthly costs. Before we discuss that tool, there are some concepts to consider first. Capacity and capacity units, storage, pay-as-you-go, and reserved instance pricing models. A capacity is a fundamental aspect of Microsoft Fabric's pricing. Capacities enable workspaces and items to operate effectively with different levels available to allocate varying amounts of compute and memory resources. An instance of Microsoft Fabric, known as a tenant, can have multiple capacities assigned to it. These capacities can be paused to avoid costs or resumed to allow various items in Fabric to operate as needed. Within a capacity are the concept of capacity units. Capacity units are a standard measure of the amount of resources available, such as compute and memory. Different workloads use capacity units at varying rates. Capacity units can be allocated to a specific workload or drawn from a shared pool where multiple workloads share the units, rather than dedicating specific resources to individual tasks. The key point is that higher power requirements will result in higher costs. Storage refers to the data volume held within your tenant. Costs may differ based on the storage type. In terms of pricing options for capacities, you can opt for pay-as-you-go or reserved instance. Pay-as-you-go allows you to pay as you go based on a per-second billing. You can see in this link here that you purchase SKUs or stock keeping units. For example, you could purchase a SKU for F2. And for each SKU, you are assigned a certain number of capacity units. The higher the SKU, the more capacity units you get, therefore the higher the cost, the more you pay. Charges for compute resources apply only when they're actively used, such as viewing reports or writing queries. It is important to note that charges will also incur for any operations such as data refreshes. Pay-as-you-go involves the concepts of bursting and smoothing. Bursting occurs when additional capacity is used to meet the demands of the current workload, meaning your workload borrows capacity units from a future time interval. For example, you may use 15 minutes of extra capacity. This difference is smoothed later within the 24-hour time frame. If smoothing cannot be applied, for instance, if you pause the capacity right after bursting occurs, there will be an additional charge for using more power. It is important to monitor the charges and ensure the system is functioning as expected. Then there is reserved instance pricing. For those in larger enterprises or who prefer consistent monthly expenses, reserved instant pricing may be a suitable option. This pricing model allows you to reserve resources and fix the cost on a monthly basis for a year, which is more economical per month compared to the pay-as-you-go model. As you can see on the screen, the reserved instance pricing is cheaper per hour if you were to be using the compute constantly. Storage costs are calculated based on a rate per gig per month, as displayed at the end of the screen. These rates apply regardless of whether you select pay-as-you-go or reserved instance pricing. It is important to note that a Power BI license is required to access Power BI specific features, which should be considered when planning your costs. Let's take a look at the pricing calculator to look at some scenarios for pricing. We've gone to this link here. Just note that it has got Microsoft Fabric in the link, so we're specifically looking at the costs associated with Fabric. When you first go to this link, we'll scroll down and you can see there's an estimate section. You'll get a default set of scenarios. So I can see here that we've got two scenarios which I've rolled up, and I can expand and roll them up as required. I'm just going to start with one, so I will actually delete this, and I can do that by clicking on the delete button on that particular scenario. I could also reclone it, which we will do later, and I can add it back in. So I will delete it again. So we've just got one scenario that we're looking at. I'll now unroll this estimate and we'll start updating it. I'm going to name the title to be F2. 100% pay as you go. Okay, so we're going to get some pricing to look at the F2 SKU 100% of the time, and we're just going to use pay as you go. We have a region which you can adjust to whichever region that you're in. I'm going to keep it on East US at the moment. You can also adjust the currency at the bottom. So the currency is in the United States, but we could change it to something else, for example, in pounds, United Kingdom, but I will change it back to dollars for now. Okay, so going up to the top, we're going to leave the SKU on F2. So we want the very cheapest, most cost-effective SKU. So we're going to keep that at F2, and we'll have it set at 730 hours. This is a month's worth of hours, essentially. We're going to keep ours on pay-as-you-go. And the estimate for that is $262.80 altogether. Now, underneath is a storage, so you'll want to think about how much storage you think you're going to be using. And there are 3 different types. There is one lake storage. This refers to the general storage used for storing data within Fabric. It includes the primary storage where your data is kept and accessed regularly. Then there's BCDR, which is business continuity and disaster recovery. This option is focused on ensuring that your data is protected and can be recovered in case of any disruptions. And then the cache. This is a high-speed storage layer that temporarily stores frequently accessed data to improve performance and reduce latency. Now, these are obviously going to cost more. We're just going to keep it on one lake storage for now. And I'm going to set the amount of gig per month to 2,000. That's the equivalent of 2 terabytes of data. Now, this is around $52 a month, so very cheap. Really, the focus of your pricing is going to be on the F2 or the SKUs that you create, not on the storage itself. That is relatively cheap. At the end, you can see the support package you can choose. Clicking on the information bar, it will tell you some more information, and you can see the differences between them, ranging from free basic support to professional direct aimed at larger companies. So I can learn more by clicking on this, and you can see the difference that you get in those different products. The difference is obvious when it comes to access to technical support by email and phone, which is what you get with these 2 options here, which are the standard and professional direct. So we're going to choose the standard option for that. So if you have any issues, you've got that support. So that gives me $100. So for this pay-as-you-go model, using F2 set 100% of the time with 2,000 gig of storage and a standard support, the estimate is $414.80. I'm now going to add another scenario in. So I'm going to roll this one up. I'm going to clone it. So we can start playing around with the estimate that we have. I'm going to change the name of the first one to be F2 75%, pay as you go. So we're now going to think about a scenario where we have 2 different capacities we're paying for, and we might pause one overnight, the F2 one, and then we might roll it up to a higher SKU to get more power when we're doing lots of our data refreshes. So if I set F2 to 75%, we're going to change the hours on this to be 547.5. So that's 75% of the monthly hours. We'll remain on pay as you go, and we'll keep everything else the same. And then in the second scenario, we're going to change this to F8, and we're going to set that for 25% of the time. And I'm going to change the number of hours to 182.5, which is 25% of the monthly hours. So again, the scenario we're thinking of is we'd maybe have it at F2 during the day. When we have a lot of our data refreshes overnight, we might scale up to F8 overnight and pause F2. So that would be the approach for it. So at the end of the option, the storage is still showing. Now, it's not clear that we need to really be paying for the storage again. So I'm going to set this to 0. We also need to make sure that we change the capacity to F8 and make sure that our data is updated. So yep, that is updated now. So we have got a monthly price of $249 for our F2 at 75%. We've got $262 approximately for 25% at F8. So overall, it's 611, just over $611 a month. Okay, so we're going to think about that scenario and then we're going to come back to this one later. I'm going to do another scenario. So I'm actually just going to click on another estimate so I can get another one and then I might be able to compare. I'm just going to refresh the browser to do this so it picks up the fact that we're looking at Microsoft Fabric. And you can see the original one we've got is still available for us. I'm going to click on a second one. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to look at a scenario for reservation pricing. Now, I'm going to name this one to F2 100% reservation. Keep the region the same. We're going to set F2. This time we're going to choose 1 year reserved. And what happens is the hours get changed because we're essentially committing to monthly hours for the whole year. We are going to have our storage again to be 2000 gig. So let's just set that. So it's the same monthly price there. After we've updated the storage, we also want to update the support to standard, which is what we chose before. So that adds $100 as well. So overall, for this particular package, we get $308.33. And this is cheaper than the pricing for 100% pay as you go at this SKU. That was $414.80. So you can see already that it's cheaper to do this. Now, if we want to scale up to F8 at night, which is what we done previously in that last example, we can choose the pay as you go option as well. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to clone this and we're going to go into that second, into the clone. We're going to expand it and we're going to change this to F8 and it will be 25% pay as you go. So we're going to change the SKU to F8. And we're going to choose pay as you go so that we can just have this set at 25%, which was our 182 hours, 0.5. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to just zero out the storage on this because it's not clear that we need to pay that again. But so at least we're being consistent in how we're checking this pricing. And if I just roll that up like this, what we can see now is we've got the monthly price for the reservation pricing is $208. The pricing for the F8, 25%, is $262, which is what we got before. But that still comes out cheaper. So our overall costs of $571 compared to what we had before, where we were doing pay as you go for them both, and we got to $611. So you really want to think about the different scenarios and using this calculator to help you think how you can save costs. Finally, I want to mention that the pricing for Copilot requires you to be on the SKU F64 or higher. So if you are wanting to use Copilot within Fabric, you need to be on at least F64. I'm going to add another estimate, so we'll just have a look at that pricing. So I'll just refresh the screen again. And in here, I'm just going to put Copilot pricing. I'm going to change it to F64. And we're going to go with reservation pricing because we know that is cheaper. And that costs over $5,000 a month. This is clearly a big investment. So as a business, you need to weigh up the benefits of Copilot in Fabric and whether you feel you're getting that amount of value by being on this SKU. One option is that you could make the F64 SKU available for the hours when people are working and then choose a much lower capacity for the remaining time. So again, you have options, play around with them. This calculator is ultimately a really useful way of keeping track of what your pricing might look like given different scenarios. And you can adjust the settings like using reservation pricing or checking whether pay as you go is a better option. If you do choose multiple capacities, you will need to implement a way of rotating between the two. Ideally, that would be automated and a task for your administrator to look at.